At the beginning of the year, articles were saying that cola could be as high as 10% for 2024, given the fact that inflation was so high. Well, given the current inflation data and where things stand today, what could we expect cola to be in 2024? We're going to talk about that in this video. We're also going to talk about current reports showing that some congressmen do want to cut Social Security benefits. This has basically been confirmed. But the weird thing is, this could actually be good for people who are already on Social Security benefits, but bad for people who are going to be on benefits in the next 10 to 15 years. So we'll describe exactly why in this video as well. As always, guys, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. My wife and I are also creating a newsletter. It's going to be completely free and sent directly to your email. So if you'd like to sign up for that, click the link in the description of this video. My wife is going to be putting that together for the most part, and it's going to have the latest updates when it comes to Social Security benefits, other programs like SSI and SSDI, and just general news about the country that could affect your retirement. All right, guys, with that said, what is happening with cola? And remember, headlines were saying, cola in 2023 was 8.7%. And at the beginning of the year, headlines were saying inflation could push cola up as high as 10%. Well, basically at this point, you probably know that cola has gone down, or inflation has gone down significantly. But let's take a look and see kind of more detailed into the inflation data and how we could expect cola to pan out given that current data. So in May, prices went up, or inflation went up 0.1% month over month. And that was a deceleration from inflation going up 0.4% month over month in April. Also, year over year in May, inflation went up 4% compared to 4.9% year over year in April. So the recent data obviously is showing inflation's been going down, right? We basically all know that. But the main point I want to talk about here is inflation, total inflation versus core inflation, right? And basically what's happening here is overall inflation is going down significantly, but core inflation is still up pretty significantly, about 5.3% year over year. And historically, they say core inflation is a better indicator as to what long-term inflation is going to be, right? Because that takes out energy and food and beverages, which is more volatile. So essentially what's happening here is, with core inflation being higher than overall inflation, some experts are thinking, well, inflation could tick back up because core inflation is still high, showing us that really we're probably going to have some pretty bad inflation for the next 6 to 12 months, which is bad, but on the one hand would lead to higher cola increases in 2024, right? Now, obviously, we're far from that potential 10% that people were speculating, but, if core inflation is a signal as to what overall inflation could be in the next 6 months, this would be bad, obviously, because inflation would be worse, but it would lead to a higher cola increase, maybe somewhere around 5 or 6%. But if you just look at the overall inflation data, it's been going down. And if that's the signal, cola could potentially be somewhere around 2 or 3% in 2024, right? This is why I think it's important to look at core inflation versus overall inflation, right? And if you look at the White House website here, they're basically trying to paint the picture that inflation is going down significantly. And if you look on your screen here, this black line here is the 12-month inflation, right? And in May, that was 4%. If you look at this blue line, that is the 3-month annualized inflation rate. So basically all that is they take the last 3 months, so they took, the last 3 months coming up to May, and they extrapolate that, over 12 months. And if you extrapolate the last 3 months over 12 months, basically inflation is around 2%, right? And obviously the White House wants you to believe this because the White House is in control. They basically, they want you to think they have things under control and things are going to go well. It could be right, it could be wrong. But that is overall inflation, right? Now, if you look at core inflation and we slide down here, growth rates of core CPI, right? That is still at 5%. So if we look at the year over year core inflation, that's 5.3%, which is closer but higher than the overall inflation rate of 4%. But if we compare that 3-month annualized rate, right? That's what we looked at, right? The White House just said that if you take the last 3 months of inflation and you extrapolate that to the next 12 months, we're averaging out right now about a 2% inflation. Again, that's just the 3-month data. But that 3-month data for core inflation is still about 5% or a little bit higher, right? So what's the signal here? Typically, they say core inflation is a signaler or an indicator as to what inflation is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. So if that is correct, we're probably going to have higher inflation around 5 or 6%, which means we're probably going to have a COLA increase of somewhere around 5 or 6% as well. Remember, COLA is calculated based off of the 3 months in Q3 of the previous year, right? So in Q3 of this year, those 3-month inflation data points are going to decide what COLA is for 2024. So if core inflation is that signal and inflation data is higher, then we're going to have that higher COLA increase somewhere around 5 or 6%, 5 or 6%. Obviously far from that 10% they originally were thinking, but still significantly higher than potentially 2 or 3%. That's basically the point we're trying to make here, right? Is core inflation going to be a better predictor of what COLA is next year, or is the overall inflation CPI data going to be a better indicator, right? There really isn't any data showing which one is a better predictor, but overall, typically when it comes to the economy, they think core inflation is a better predictor. Now, one of the reasons that core inflation is actually higher than overall inflation is because of housing. Now, if you look on your screen, housing, this green, light green, teal color here, that's about 44.4% of the overall CPI calculation. And obviously, currently we have rents going down, but this data is lagging. So a lot of people think that in the next 6 to 12 months, that number will start to go down and core inflation will start to go down. But will that be before or after COLA is calculated in Q3 of 2023, right? That's going to make a big difference when it comes to calculating the COLA for 2024. Now, what is going on when it comes to cutting Social Security benefits? Where is that confirmation that some congressmen do want to cut benefits, but oddly enough, this could be good for people who are already on benefits, right? Because there's a lot of headlines out there scaring people on benefits, saying that they want to cut your benefits and you got to be careful. But the kind of the strange thing is what they're currently proposing, even though it would cut benefits for people, young people like me who are going to be on benefits in 30 years, or even people who are 50 years old now who are going to be on benefits in 12 years, it would cut benefits for them. What they're currently proposing would actually be good for people who are currently on benefits. And the reason is because they would increase the full retirement age to 69 for anyone who turns 62 years old in 2033. There's a lot of numbers there, right? But basically, if you're already on benefits, they're not going to change your benefits. But if you're about 50 years old right now, or younger, they're going to increase the full retirement age to 69, which means anyone who takes benefits early before full retirement age would have their benefits cut even more for taking benefits early, right? That's a little bit confusing. But essentially why that would be good for people who are currently on benefits is because it would allow the trust fund to remain solvent, okay? And if the trust fund does not remain solvent, basically by default, everyone across the board would have their benefits cut by somewhere around 20 to 30% if Congress doesn't do anything specific to really take care of those cuts, right? Because the trust fund will not be solvent. There'll be nothing left in the trust fund. Incoming taxes are not enough to pay for, existing benefits. Everyone's benefits would be cut across the board. But if they increase the full retirement age to 69, which is what they're currently proposing, current retirees' benefits would not be changed, but then people coming in to the system every single year, right? Those people, starting in 2033, if they took their benefits early, would have their benefits cut even further, right? Because you're penalized each year, basically each month you take benefits early, you're penalized more and more and more. So people, for example, like my dad, who's in his 50s, he could potentially have his benefits cut even further, which would be bad for people who are going to be on benefits soon in the next 12 years. But it would actually be good for people currently on benefits because you would have less money coming out of the trust fund, meaning the trust fund would stay solvent for much longer. And people currently on benefits would not have to worry about the trust fund running out of money and having their benefits cut by default. It's a little bit confusing, but I hope that kind of makes sense. That is essentially why, although these potential cuts, they're scary, especially for people who are not on benefits yet, and you don't know how things are going to play out, right? This is the current proposal. Things could change, but the way things are being proposed today, oddly enough, those potential cuts would not affect people who are currently on benefits. Now, essentially what's happening here is Kevin McCarthy in the House, they have such a slim majority that conservative Republicans, there's about a dozen of them, I think 11, people like Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz, they are really causing gridlock in the House. And they're forcing Kevin McCarthy to take a look at overall spending cuts. Otherwise, they're going to keep blocking every single thing Kevin McCarthy wants to do, right? So this is essentially why, although they solved the debt ceiling issue and they agreed, okay, these are the cuts we're going to make when it comes to discretionary spending, part of the agreement there was, we're not done, right? And Kevin McCarthy came out and said, we're not done. We're going to continue to make cuts, and we're going to have to make cuts when it comes to mandatory spending. And, on the one side, you have Republicans saying, we don't want to cut Social Security benefits. Then on the other hand, you have people like Bernie Sanders and liberals, attacking Republicans saying, they're going to take away your benefits. You should hate Republicans. You have both sides really saying things you don't know what to believe. Really what's happening here is Republicans have not directly said they want to cut benefits, but they've indirectly said they want to cut benefits, right? So in one statement, Kevin McCarthy said, we're going to take a look at mandatory spending. Then later on in the interview, he kind of stated that, of course, the majority of mandatory spending is driven by Social Security, Medicare, and paying interest on U.S. debt, right? So you don't have to be a genius to put two and two together here. We also have an interview from Matt Gaetz. He actually came out and specifically said that he wants to reform mandatory spending, and of course, that is driven mainly by Social Security and Medicare, right? So let's take a quick look and see what he said.
Are we headed for a standoff where you and your colleagues are demanding of cuts, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
We did include in our negotiations a reversion to 2022 spending levels that would require changes in some of the mandatory spending, which of course is driven by Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Social Security, Social Security, Social Security.
Okay, so again, not to pick sides here politically, but we have Republicans saying one thing, Democrats saying one thing. Really, Republican leadership indirectly says, they want to cut benefits for future retirees, not people currently on benefits. And then you have people like Matt Gaetz really directly coming out and saying that, yes, they want to reform benefits. And again, all of this is really being driven by like 10 to 12 conservative Republicans who are causing complete gridlock in the House for Kevin McCarthy unless he agrees to try and create some kind of reform when it comes to Social Security, Medicare, and potentially even something when it comes to the government taking on more debt. So let's take a quick look. This video does a really good job of kind of highlighting what is happening in the House and how this could affect legislation going forward, specifically Social Security benefits.
Speaker Kevin McCarthy struck a deal to quell internal rebellion in the House Republican Conference this week, the result of a handful of hardline members' dissatisfaction with the debt ceiling compromise. Lisa Desjardins brings us up to speed now on what happened and what it means for the House GOP. Lisa, good to see you.
Hi.
So help us understand, how has this small group of hardliners gained enough power to control the workflow of the entire House of Representatives?
This would be like me taking over the show right now when I'm not even the anchor. But this comes down to the margins in the House of Representatives. Let's take a look at where things stand. In the House right now, 218 votes is what you need for a majority. Republicans have 222, so they've got that majority. But let's talk about these 11 members who figured out, if you look at those 11 members, then they have the power to control the majority. There they are. And these members have a few things in common. Some are members of the House Freedom Caucus, but one thread that runs through them, Amna, when you talk about how they voted for Kevin McCarthy on those first speaker votes, most of them voted no. And that is a significant thread here. When you look at these names, this is a group that does not have a name of its own. It's not the Freedom Caucus, but these are the names I watch when I look at the voting board, and so does Kevin McCarthy.
So what about the timing? Why is this group taking this stand now?
This was coming out of the debt ceiling deal, as you said, and this, they say, happened spontaneously on the floor. Those frustrations bubbled up. They realized they did not have the votes to oust McCarthy. They did have the votes to freeze the entire House floor for a week. These cuts will be passed by the House in some form, potentially, and then the Senate will pass a very different deal. And then we could have, yes, another fiscal standoff in September over government funding. This is heading to another significant fiscal cliff.
Okay, guys, so obviously what's happening in the House is really controlled to a large extent by this small group of conservative Republicans, right? Now, the good news is the current proposal, surprisingly, would not affect people currently on benefits, but let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. Also, despite the fact that COLA is not going to be as large as they were hoping it would be, around 10%, it's not even going to be as high as it was last year at 8.7%. There is a potential it could still be around 5 or 6% if core inflation does end up being that signal as to what inflation will be for the rest of 2023. But again, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you guys like this content, again, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're interested in getting that free newsletter in your email, click the link in the description below. Leave us your email. It's completely free, and it's going to keep you updated, specifically what's happening with Social Security updates and generally the economy and the country, things that could affect you in your retirement. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.